أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Respected speaker Dr. Olsi Jazexhiu, Professor Dr. Kamaronia, one of the leading Muslim women scholars of comparative religion, who has been in the Department of Usuluddin and Comparative Religion for a long time, who was also a founding member of the Department of Usuluddin and Comparative Religion. Dear IIMU fellows, academic staff, lecturers, students, participants from different parts of the world, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام.
First of all, I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us this opportunity to engage in series of lectures on various issues facing the Muslim Ummah. And this is IIMU's Muslim Unity Lecture Series 3. As you all know, IIMU, which is International Institute for Muslim Unity, is in existence for about 23 years in IIUM, International Islamic University, Malaysia. And this institute is engaged in many programs, training camps, seminars, talks, and conferences focusing on Muslim unity, Muslim leadership, and Muslim minority issues. For the benefit of those who have joined our program today, let me briefly highlight the vision, the mission, and some functions of the Institute. The vision of the Institute is to be a leading institution specializing in matters concerning the Muslim world and civilizational issues. And the mission of the Institute is to actively address the concerns of the Muslim Ummah and humanity, aiming for the betterment of all through research, human capacity development, and collaborative efforts with Muslims and international organizations. To briefly recall some of the functions of the Institute, first, to initiate research and organize seminars and conferences addressing spiritual and socio-economic issues in the Muslim world, matters of civilization, practical applications of maqasid in leadership and everyday life, to foster stronger relationships with major Islamic and international organizations, aiming to enhance the well-being of the Ummah and humanity as a whole, to enhance human capacity in the Muslim world through comprehensive training programs and interactive workshops, to collaboratively organize programs with other organizations on the themes prioritized by the Institute, to design and conduct training programs aimed at nurturing young leaders with the Muslim world, to elevate the status of International Institute of, to elevate the status of International Islamic University Malaysia as a globally recognized Islamic educational institution. And lastly, to actively promote public diplomacy aimed at mitigating and resolving conflicts among countries in the Muslim world. These are our vision, mission, and a few functions. And for today's program, we have with us Dr. Olsi Jazexhiu, who is an assistant professor at the Department of History and Civilization of the International Islamic University, Malaysia. He is specialized personality in not only historical and civilization studies, but focusing on Europe, the Mediterranean, and the Levant. His first degree is from IIUM. He did his bachelor degree in 2001 and his master degree in 2003. After that, he has done another master degree by research in European University Institute of Italy in 2007. And later, he also pursued his doctoral program in the same university, European University Institute, Italy in 2011. We are fortunate to have this scholar who is also from Albania, luckily, who knows not only the issues related to Muslims and Islam in Albania, he is also well-versed on Muslim issues in the entire Eastern Europe and partly some of the nations in Central Asia. We are really joyful and grateful to him to come forward to deliver a lecture. And we welcome Dr. Olsi, Professor Kamar Onia, and many others who are on the Zoom today by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the topic of today's lecture is Islam in Albania. Of course, he will be talking about historical issues from the Ottomans to the present. Along that, he will be also highlighting the issues facing the Muslim Ummah of Albania. With this, may I respectfully call upon my dear brother, friend, colleague in the Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman Kulliyah of Islamic Review, Knowledge and Human Sciences to deliver his lecture. فليتفضل Dr. Olsi mashkuran. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Professor Thameem. Let me share my slide with you.
Yes.
Can you see the slide?
Yes, it has. It is there.
All right. So everybody can see the slide, right? Okay. So first of all, thank you for inviting me. And my presentation today will deal with the history of Islam in Albania from the era of the Ottomans to the present times. Now, history of Islam in Albania is very complicated, but before we go into that, I just want to explain to our public where is Albania located. So as you can see here, Albania is a country in the Balkans or Southeastern Europe, which is close to Italy. Albania to Italy is like from Kuala Lumpur to Johor, and its neighboring countries are Greece, Macedonia, Kosovo, and Montenegro. Albania is a place where Orthodox and Catholic Christianities were formed, and during the era of the great schism between Catholicism and Orthodoxy, Albania was the place where Western Christianity fought and was divided from Eastern Christianity. And this division can be seen until today, where southern Albania has many Christian Orthodox believers of the Greek rite, while northern Albania has many Catholic believers. So if we use the Huntingtonian theory of the clash of civilization and the dividing line between Catholicism and Orthodoxy, Albania is a country where Catholicism and Orthodoxy has historically fought and they were divided. Now, when was Albania created? There was never an Albania in the history of mankind, but Albania was invented, like many other countries, like Canada, Australia, etc., by the British. So what will be the reason for the invention of Albania? It will be the First Balkan War. So we will have a major war in Southeastern Europe between 1912 and 1913, where a Christian coalition of Balkan states are going to attack the Ottomans, will defeat them. And after defeating the Ottoman territories will be occupied by the winning Christian powers. Among others, we will have even Albania, or what we know nowadays as Albania, being occupied by the Christian Balkan League of Serbia, Greece, Bulgaria, and Montenegro. Now, as we can understand, the beginning of the 19th century was the century of nationalism, where the powers of Europe were fighting each other in the name of the nation state. And the invasion of these Ottoman vilayets, I'm going to go in a moment and explain what were these vilayets, and the creation of a greater Serbia and Greece were unacceptable for Austro-Hungary and Italy. And for this reason, in December 1912, the great powers of Europe, the United Kingdom, Germany, Russia, Austro-Hungary, Italy, and France, they will organize a congress or a meeting in London where they are going to decide what to do with the remaining parts of the Ottoman Empire in Europe. And then when it came to the westernmost part of the Ottoman Empire, Italy and Austro-Hungary will insist that these Ottoman territories will not be given to Serbia and Greece, but a country will be created which will be known as Albania. The term Albania comes from Latin. It comes from the term alba della luce, which means the place where the sun comes from. Because as you can see here in the map, for the Romans, whenever they were going to the Adriatic Sea, they will see the sun rising in the morning and they will see the mountains of Albania. And the Romans, during the time of the Roman Empire, they called the western shores of the Balkan Peninsula as Albania. But the concept of Albania for the Romans and for the Venetians did not describe what we know nowadays as Albania. During the time of the Venetian Empire, Albania was included Dalmatia, the coastal areas of Montenegro, and what we know nowadays as northern Albania. Nevertheless, the great powers of Europe, like they invented names like Canada, they had to come up with a name about this territory that they will turn it into a state, and they're going to name it as Albania. Now, with the establishment of Albania, and Albania will be officially established by the Treaty of London, and the date for the creation of Albania officially by the powers of Europe will be 29th of July 1913. What will the powers of Europe do is that they will create the first Muslim majority country in Europe. And for these people who know history, we know very well that especially since the Turco-Russian War of 1877, we have the creation of the Eastern Question in Europe. The Eastern Question was the great diplomatic, military, and geostrategical question that the powers of Europe will have, and they will fight with each other about what to do and how to scramble the Ottoman territories. For example, nowadays we're witnessing the tragedy of Palestine, and the creation of Israel is part of the so-called Eastern Question. So the very same powers who are going to invent Israel and colonize Palestine will be the very same powers who are going to establish Albania. So Albania was designed to serve as a buffer state for the Austrians who did not want Serbia to come to the Adriatic Sea, because in this time we had Pan-Slavism, which was a very dominant ideology in Europe. And World War I will start because of the clash between Pan-Slavism and Pan-Germanism, when in 1914, in Sarajevo, Bosnia, a Serbian terrorist, Gavrilo Princip, is going to kill Archduke Ferdinand. So the British, who did not want to see the continent descend into a war, who wanted in a way to delay World War I, which will come 1 year after, decided to create Albania as a Muslim majority state in 1913. Italy was also interested to create an Albania. The reason was that the ambitions of the Greek kingdom in this time was to annex the areas of southern Albania. And by annexing southern Albania, it meant that Greece will be able to control the Straits of Otranto. The Straits of Otranto is this waterway that you see here in the map, where you can read the city of Gjirokastër. So this waterway is, in a way, the channel which connects the Adriatic Sea to the Ionian Sea and the wider Mediterranean. So Italians, they didn't want Greece to control southern Albania, because if Greece was to control southern Albania, Greece would have become like the Houthis nowadays in the Red Sea, where they control the Bab el-Mandab, and they do not allow the British and the Americans and the Israelis to trade. So Albania was created with the blessing of the British. Now, the person who was the architect of the creation of Albania was Sir Edward Grey, was British Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs. And in one of his speeches, he said the following: "I'm quite aware that the whole comes to be stated. When the whole comes to be stated, it will be open on many points to a great deal of criticism from anyone with local knowledge who looks at it purely on the merits of locality itself. It is to be borne in mind that in making the agreement, the primary essential was to preserve agreement between the great powers themselves. And if the agreement about Albania has secured that, it has done the work which is the most essential in the end interest of the peace of Europe. So the British, they created Albania in order to evade a major European war, which, as we're going to see later on, will involve Russia, Britain, Germany, Austro-Hungary, and France. Now, what was Albania before 1913? Before 1913, in 1912, there was no Albania, but Albania was part of the Ottoman Empire. Albania was not a unified region. It was not like you have Johor for Malaysia. Albania belonged to Rumelia. The term Rumelia comes from Greek and Ottoman and Roman, which means the land of the Romans. We have in the Quran Surah Ar-Rum, which is the Romans, and Rumelia, or the Balkans, was the territory where the Romans lived. So when the Ottomans invaded Southeastern Europe, they called the land of Southeastern Europe, where nowadays we have countries like Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, Albania, Serbia, Montenegro, Kosovo, and Bosnia, they called this area as Rumeli, the land of the Romans. Why? Because the people who were living in this part of the world in that time, they were calling themselves Romans, and this term will be inherited even in Ottoman language. And during the Ottoman times, before the creation of national identities, before the invention of the Greeks, of the Serbs, of the Montenegrins, of the Bulgars, people used to call themselves Rumelios. And in the Byzantine or Greek language, they used to call the Byzantine Empire O Vasilea ton Romaion, which means the kingdom of the Romans. Now, Rumelia and Anatolia were the two core peninsulas where the Ottoman Empire existed from the 15th to the 20th century. So this map doesn't show very well, but yeah, probably you can probably see at the very corner. So the historical Ottoman Empire was extended between two peninsulas. So one was the Balkan Peninsula, otherwise known as Rumeli, and the other peninsula was known as Anatolia, or in Turkish is known as Anadolu, or in Greek means the land cross in Greek. So Rumelia was a very important territory for the Ottoman Empire. And for those like me who specialize themselves in the Ottoman history, it is known that Rumelia was the most important part of the Ottoman state. Most of the Ottoman viziers, ministers, pashas were coming from Rumelia, or from what the British will call in the 19th century as Turkey in Europe. Now, when Albania will be created, this will be a great shock for the European diplomacy. Because until 1912, there was no such a thing as an Albanian identity. And here we have a statement from Wadam Pekok in his book, Albania, the founding state of Europe, where he says, with the beginning of 1913, Albania suddenly awoke to find herself famous, and the Albanians, who were considered to be Turks of a sort and oppressors of the Christians, with the auctions with the actions of Austria and Italy, selfish action it might be, forced the Western Europeans to recognize that the Albanians are not Turks, but the oldest of European races, and that a very large proportion of them belong to the Roman Catholic and Orthodox churches. So what happened in 1913 was that we had a regime change in Albania, if we can put it like this. The Ottomans were out, the Serbs and the Greeks came in, but the Europeans forced them to get out, and then the European great powers, they decided that we will have an Albania. But being a Turk in Europe at the beginning of the 20th century meant like being a terrorist. So the creation of Albania and the recognition of the Albanians to be some good and ancient Europeans and not Turks, it was similar to what we are witnessing in Syria nowadays, where we have Abu Muhammad al-Golani, who only 2 months ago he was a wanted terrorist, and now he is a revolutionary who brought a revolution in Syria. So it was a similar hypocrisy on the part of the Europeans, who until 1912 they hated the Albanians because the Albanians were the avant-garde of Islam in Europe, because they were facing European Christianity. They were the most radicals of the Muslims because they were coming from the borders of Islam and Christianity, and they were, by the way, the most fanatical supporters of Sultan Abdul Hamid. Now that the Ottomans lost control, they had to be accepted as Europeans. Now, Albania will become part of the Ottoman Empire since the 15th century. Sultan Mehmet Fatih will have particular interest on Albania because after capturing Constantinople and turning Constantinople to Islam, the ambition of the Ottomans will be to use what the Ottomans will call as Karili, the lands of the Carlos, because there was an Proto-Albanian prince with the name Karl Topia, with whom the Turks will make a deal and they will come in southern Albania. But there was no Albania this time. So in this time, the territory was known as the Despotate of Epirus, or part of the Byzantine Empire. But Albania will become very important for the Ottomans because, especially during time of Mehmet Fatih, the Ottomans will cross the Otranto Strait, that you can see it here, where you can read on the Italian part the Apulia, and on the Albanian part you read Albania and Epirus. So the Ottomans, they will use the city of Vlora, and Sultan Mehmet will send a fighter whose name was Gedik Ahmed Pasha. He was coming from Albania with Ottoman troops to invade Otranto, and because the plans of Mehmet will be to invade Italy and liberate Rome for Islam, because the dream of Mehmet was to liberate the Rumetain, or the two Romes, and both Romes will embrace Islam. So he invaded or liberated Constantinople, which we know nowadays as Istanbul, and the dream of Mehmet will be to liberate even Rome to Islam, but he will fail because he will die. Now, during the 18th and 19th century, because when the Ottomans will come to what we know nowadays as Albania, but even Kosovo, the majority of the population was not Albanian speaking. What we know nowadays as Southern Albania, it was dominated by Greeks, Byzantines, and Slavs. And what we know nowadays as Kosovo was inhabited by Slavs, Proto-Serbs, I would say. But what will happen is that during the 18th and 19th century, there will be a massive process of Islamization of the Western Balkans. And by the end of the 18th century and beginning of the 19th century, this local Muslim ayans, they will form their own pashaliks. So the term pashalik in Ottoman Empire, we can, in modern terminology, we can describe as a federal state, like you have Johor or Kelantan within Malaysia. So we will have the emergence of two powerful Albanian-dominated pashaliks, and this will be the pashalik of Shkodra, which will be created in the north of Albania, and then we'll have the pashalik of Yanina under Ali Pasha. And the pashalik of Yanina will dominate what we know nowadays as Greece. So from Athens to central Albania, this territory will be under Albanian Muslim rule. But because of the conflict that Ali Pasha of Yanina will have with Sultan Mahmud II, and Mahmud will assassinate him, with his death, the Pashalik of Yanina will be destroyed, and we will have the creation of the Greek state. So for as long as the Albanians were ruling the Pashalik of Yanina, there was no Greece, but Greece was created after the killing of Ali Pasha, and Greek revolutionaries, terrorists, you might call them whatever you want, backed by the powers of Europe, by France, Britain, and Russia. They will be armed, and they will fight the mostly Albanian Muslims who were ruling over northern Greece, and we will have the creation of the Greek state. Albanians, they will try as much as they can to stop the Greek revolution, and for those who know the Egyptian history, we'll have Mehmet Ali Pasha, and now another famous Albanian, who in this time he will leave Kavala, which was nowadays is in Greece, and he will go to Egypt to fight Bonaparte, and he will become the ruler of Egypt from 1805 to 1848, and his Albanian family is going to rule Egypt until 1952. So his family, he'll send his son and the Egyptian fleet to fight the Greek rebellion, but finally they will be crushed, and the Egyptian fleet will be destroyed by the British and the French at the Battle of Navarino. So with the killing of Ali Pasha, we will have the start of the withdrawal of the Ottomans from the Balkans, and Albanians who were dominating the Balkans, they were the major pillar of Ottoman rule in Europe. They will see their territories to squeeze, and you will see many Albanians now who they will start to become muhajirs. Many of them will end up in Istanbul, and others will retreat towards what we know as Albania today. Now, the battle, or the Greek Revolution and the Serbian Revolution, which will start in 1805, will see the territories of the Albanian speakers to squeeze in the Balkans, and because we'll have the creation of Orthodox nation states, we'll have the creation of Serbia, of Greece, and finally, with the Russo-Turkish War of 1877, we will have a further expansion of Pan-Slavism and Orthodoxy in the Balkans. And the Ottomans will be very badly defeated by the Russians. This will be the peak of the Eastern question, when the powers of Europe will understand that the existence of Islam and the Ottomans in Europe was only a matter of time. Now, until 1912, most Albanian speakers lived in 4 Ottoman vilayets in the Western Balkans. So you can see here a map on the right, and in this map you can see the 4 Ottoman vilayets where a great majority of the population was Muslim, and majority of the Muslims were Albanian speakers. Now, in Kosovo and in Shkodra, Albanian speakers were a majority, but in the vilayet of Manastir and Yanina that you see here in the map, not all Muslims were Albanians. A great number of Muslims, they were Turks, they were Vlachs, and they were Greeks. Now, until 1912, Albanians were concentrated in these 4 vilayets, and those vilayets were part of the Ottoman Empire, or otherwise known as Rumelia, or Turkey in Europe. This is a demographic map of Rumelia, or Southeastern Europe, of 1861. And as you can see in this map, the majority of the population of what we know nowadays as the mainland Greece, Albania, Kosovo, and even parts of Serbia, in that time known as the Vilayet of Niš, the population was mainly Albanian speaker. So the areas that you see in yellow, they are described as Shqiptar, because this is a term that Southern Albanians were using to describe themselves. And this term Shqiptar will be taken by European Orientalists to describe this particular Muslim population of Europe, which according to Johann Hahn, while Europeans used to think that these people are Turks, according to him, these people are not Turks, but they are a different race because they spoke a different language. And as you can see here in the map, the areas in red are Turkish populations, but these Turkic populations, they lived mainly in Anatolia. In this map, you can see even the division between Rumelia and Anatolia, where you have most of the Turks living either in Anatolia or in the territories of countries that we know nowadays as Bulgaria or Romania. And you had massive concentration of Turks in the area of Greece, which nowadays is known as the area of the Thessaloniki. I forgot the name of this peninsula. And you had large Greek, Turkish concentration of populations, even in places like Macedonia or Greece itself. But as you can see from the map, the western part of Turkey in Europe was mainly inhabited by Albanians, and majority of the Albanians were Muslim. Now, the end of the Ottoman Empire in the Balkans will come during the First Balkan War, which will start on 8th of October 1912 and will end on 30th of May 1913. And this was what was the map of the Ottoman Empire until October 1912. So the Ottoman Empire was a major European power. But because the newly founded Christian states of Europe, Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia, Montenegro, who will be supported by the powers of Europe, and in particular the Russians, they will be armed and they will build a coalition. And with this coalition, they are going, moreover, to use even the chaos that is going to exist in this time in the Ottoman state. Because for those people who know Ottoman history, this was the era of Young Turks. We had a coup against Sultan Abdul Hamid in 1909. And the Young Turks who take power in Istanbul, most of them were atheists, they were kafirs. And one of their chief ideologues, by the way, was Vladimir Jabotinsky. Vladimir Jabotinsky will be sent to Istanbul by the World Zionist Congress. He'll be paid by the Rothschilds, and he'll be one of the main ideologues of Young Turk or Turkish nationalism. He'll betray the Turks in 1914. He'll go to the British, and later he'll go to Israel, And for those people who know the history of revisionist Zionism, Benjamin Netanyahu is the product of Vladimir Jabotinsky. He was a Ukrainian Jew who will, in 1909, after the Young Turks, they will topple Sultan Abdul Hamid. He will go in Istanbul, and he will be one of their main. He will be the publisher of their magazine, the Young Turk, and because we will have the Young Turks who will take power in Istanbul, and they will start anti-Islamic reforms. We'll have a chaos in the Balkans. We'll have the majority of the Muslims, especially the Muslims of northern Albania and Kosovo, who are going to hate the Young Turks like hell, because what the Young Turks will do in this time, they're going to arrest Sultan Abdul Hamid. Do you see my mouse when I move the mouse here? Can my mouse be seen?
Yes, yes.
All right.
Yeah, we
So
can see, we
what?
can see.
Okay, so what the Young Turks will do is that they will arrest Sultan Abdul Hamid, and they will imprison him here in Thessaloniki. So this is known as the Chalkidiki Peninsula. I forgot the term of the Greek peninsula. And they will jail Sultan Abdul Hamid in the Villa Alatini. Alatini was a very wealthy Jewish family, and the Young Turks, in order to humiliate Abdul Hamid and political Islam, they will make him a prisoner in a Jewish home. And in this time, we'll have a number of revolts by the Kosovars against the Young Turks. And they will, in 1911, they will even march to Uskub or Skopje, today's capital of Macedonia. They will liberate Skopje, and they will intend to march towards Thessaloniki to liberate Sultan Abdul Hamid. So the Ottoman Empire from 1909 to 1912 will be in a state of a civil war. So it will be like Syria today, where everyone is fighting everyone. And the Serbs, the Bulgars, the Greeks, and Montenegrins, they are going to use it in order to invade and destroy the Ottoman Empire. Now, what will happen with the end of the First Balkan War, where are we? 30th of May 1913, we'll have a new reality in Europe. Ottoman Empire will be out, and we will have the creation of the Greater Serbia. So the areas that you see in blue are territories invaded by the Greeks. The areas that you see in brown or yellow next to Montenegro will be occupied by the Montenegrins, and the areas that you see in light green will be occupied by the Bulgars, and the areas that you see in yellow will be occupied by the Greeks. So we'll have the creation of a greater Greece, a greater Bulgaria, and a greater Serbia. And what will remain unoccupied or uninvaded will be this little spot that you see in the map known as Albania. This will be where the Austro-Hungarians, they will sponsor an Albanian bey whose name will be Ismail Kemal. Ismail Kemal, by the way, he was an Ottoman official. He was a speaker of the Ottoman parliament. Before this, he was a secretary of Mithat Pasha, the prime minister whom Sultan Abdul Hamid will oust him from power, accusing him of killing Sultan Murad. He will be a poly agent, a person who served mostly to the British and the Greeks. But with the insistence of the Austrians, this little spot, which is the hinterland of city of Vlora, will be left uninvaded, and this will be the genesis of Albania. Now, with the start of World War I, there will be no Albania, even though the great powers of Europe will declare the creation of Albania in 1913, but as the First World War will start, Albania will be invaded by the Austrians, by the Serbs, and the Greeks. But then, after First World War, and because the last president of Albania, the person that you see here in the picture on the right, Esat Pasha Toptani, he will fight with the Allies against the Ottomans and the Germans, and officially Albania will be treated as a victorious country. In the Peace Conference of Paris, there will be big fights between Britain on one side and Italians and Greeks and Yugoslavs on the other side, because the desire of Yugoslavia, Italy, and Greece was to divide Albania. But the Greeks the British will discover that there is oil in Albania. They will push the Albanians to organize a congress known as the Congress of Lushnja, which will be held from January 21 to 31 in a city of Albania known as Lushnja. And the British, they will use this Congress to, in a way, pressure the League of Nations to recognize Albania as a state. Because the British, they didn't want Albania to be divided between the Italians and the Greeks and Yugoslavs. So we have again Britain, which plays, and luckily we have the first Muslim majority country in Europe to be created. But the biggest problem of Albania was that it was the only Muslim majority country in a very Islamophobic Europe. This was the time when Muslims were being killed, were being deported. From 1877 to 1920, according to the Ottoman historian Justin McCarthy, some 5 million Muslims will be killed or be deported from the Balkans and the territory, the Russian territories in the Black Sea. So it was an era of massive hysteria against Muslims. Now, the creation of the first Albanian state, which will start in 1920, this state will be created by ex-Ottoman officials. Most of them were Albanian, but some were not Albanian. Some were Vlach, some were Turk. And the first Albania, which will emerge after 1920, will emerge as a secular state. And then from 1921 to 1927, Albania will be dominated by this person. His name was Ahmet Zogoli. For those who know Turkish, Zogoli means the sons of Zog, Zogoglu, you write it in Turkish. He will be one Albanian, he was a son of a bey. A bey is like a dato here in Malaysia. Educated in Istanbul, and he was educated with the sons of Sultan Abdul Hamid. He was raised in Istanbul, but by adapting to the new realities, he will become the new ruler of Albania. Zogu will rule Albania from 1922 to 1939. He will serve as prime minister from 22 to 24, president from 25 to 28, and then he will declare himself a king from 1928 to 1939. Being commanded by the British and the French, like you have the example of Ataturk in Turkey or Reza Shah in Iran, Zog will have no option but to build Albania as a secular state. And when he will rule Albania from 1921 to 1923, when he will be a minister of interior, he will implement a reign of terror in the country. This reign of terror will mean he'll make an open fight against Ottomanist Albanians, because Albanians, they didn't want the creation of Albania. They wanted to rejoin the Ottoman Caliphate, because the kind of Islam that Albanians practiced in this time was the Islam of din ve devlet. The term din ve devlet means that you cannot have a religion without a state. And Sunni Muslims of this time, majority of Albanians, they were Sunni Muslims. They understood Islam differently from what we understand nowadays, because for them, to be a Muslim, you had to believe in a caliph. Nowadays, Muslims are mostly Protestants because we have no caliphs. We are like Catholics without a pope. And Zog will be very instrumental on forcing the Muslims to renounce the concept of the Ottoman Caliphate. He will close many mosques and madrasas, will ban the use of Osmanlija or Ottoman, because the language that Albanians will use until 1923 will be Ottoman. Albanians, even though Albanian was a spoken dialect, it was like Javanese that you have nowadays in Indonesia. The language that was spoken, like you have in Indonesia, Bahasa Indonesia. In Ottoman Empire and what we know nowadays as Albania, the official language was Bahasa Ottoman. So Zog will prohibit the usage of Bahasa Ottoman. He will prohibit the use of the Arabic script, because Albanians, like Malays, used to write their language in Arabic, like Malays write the Jawi. And in 1923, with the backing and advice of British and French consuls, he will organize the first Albanian Muslim Congress that will create probably the first church of Islam in Europe, known as Jamia Islamia, or the Muslim community. This institution will be created in order to create a new national identity for Muslims, a secular identity, where Muslims, through this institution, which will serve as the agent of the secular state, they'll pledge their loyalty to the secular Albanian state, and they will have to forget the Ottoman Caliphate. Now, the process for secularization of Islam and Albania will start actually since 1914. After the proclamation of Albania in 1913, the great powers of Europe, they choose a German prince known as Prince William of Wied, and they made him the Prince of Albania. They created a Principality of Albania, but this state exists only for 6 months. They will bring him to Albania, and he will rule the country for 6 months, but Muslims of central Albania, they were very fanatical Sunni Muslims, they will revolt and they will topple the state of Wied in September 1914, and they will declare their reunification with the Ottoman Caliphate. But the Islamic State of Muslims of Central Albania will not last more than a few weeks, because we'll have the start of World War I, and Albania will be invaded, most of it, by Austria, and then Italy, Greece, and Serbia. But Islam will have to wait in Albania until 1923, when the Muslim community of Albania will be established, and then under the rule of President Zog, later King Zog, Albania will ban the Sharia and will replace the Sharia law with the French secular law. Because until 1928, Albania was like Malaysia today, where you have the existence of both laws. You have the secular law and you have the Islamic law for Muslims and secular for non-Muslims. So until this time, Albania was still practicing the Majalla and the Sharia, which were Ottoman laws. But by 1928, there will be a total revolution in Albania, where Islam will officially be prohibited. Muslims will be forced to change their names. They will have to adopt a surname. You cannot be named in Albania like Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab. You have to have a surname like my Olsi, Jazexhiu. The Arabic language and script will be prohibited. Sunday will be declared a holiday. Friday will be a working day. And I mean, there will be, I mean, even the timing will be changed, because until this time, the Muslims were using the time of Ala Turca, which I suppose most of our viewers probably have not witnessed it. But for those who are from Bosnia, if you go to Sarajevo nowadays, where is the Gazi Husrevbek Jamia, there you'll see a Sahat Kula, where Bosnians who are very fanatical on preserving their past, they still have the time of Ala Turca. So the time of Ala Turca, the measuring of the time starts with Maghrib. So when Maghrib comes, the new day starts. But we follow the Western system, and the new day starts at 12 midnight. So we'll have Zog, King Zog, who will start the process of secularization and at the same time Albanianization of the Sunnis. In 1923, King Zog will organize the Sunni Muslims into a state church institution known as the Jama Islamia, or Kashili-i Muslimanismus, which means the Council of the Muslims. And this institution must pledge loyalty to the secular Albanian state and not to the Caliph anymore. The Council of Muslims will be later known as the Muslim Community of Albania. And I mean, the idea is that this is the Council of the Sunnis, but it was not only the Sunnis. Sunnis were, I mean, Sunnis like we know nowadays, were a minority in Ottoman Europe. So most of the so-called people who will be Sunniized, most of them, they were Sufis. So we'll have many Sufi tarikats like Qadiris, Tijanis, Saadis, Rufais, Halvetis, Mevlevis, who will all be gathered around this institution, which will be known as the Muslim community. And these Sufi tarikats will follow the Ottoman dictum, for those who know Ottoman history, that there is no tarikat without a shariat. Because the Ottomans, especially since time of Selim I, because they had to face a Shia insurgency in Anatolia coming from the Safavid Iran, they had to forcefully Sunniize the tarikas. So, I mean, even though most tarikas, with the exception of the Naqshbandis, who have their silsila from Hazreti Abu Bakr, the other tarikas like Qadiris, Rufais, Saadis, Halvatis, they have their silsila from Hazreti Ali, and most of them believe in the 12 imams. They were forced by the Ottomans to accept the Sunni Sharia, and then you can practice your own tariqat within your tekke. And as you can see here, this is one of the pictures of the creation of the Sunni Muslim community. And for those who understand from the way how Muslim clerics dress, you'll see some of them who have black turbans, and many of these mullahs that you see here in the picture, many of them are Sufi sheikhs. They are not Sunnis. Now, apart from organizing I'll call them Sunnis, or all the Muslims, into this institution under King Zog, a new religion of Islam will be created in Albania, known as the Bektashi community. Now, the Bektashis, they were historically the sect of the Yenicheris. The Yenicheris were the special troops of the Ottoman Empire. The Yenicheris, they practiced Bektashism. This was a kind of religious rite created by a Shia dervish who will come from Khorasan, Iran. And his name will be Haji Veli Bektash. But Ottomans under Sultan Orhan and Murat and Mehmet, they will use this religious sect as the sect of their special troops, the Yenicheris. And most of Yenicheris, they will not be original. Sorry? Hello?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. And most Yenicheris, they will not be actually original Muslims. Most Yenicheris will be originally Christians, and the Ottoman state will use the institution of the army to Islamize these people. But since 1826, because of the conflict of Sultan Mahmud II with the Yenicheris, when many Yenicheris will be destroyed by the Ottoman sultans as part of their secularization and modernization, the Bektashis, who were their sect, will also default. And when Ataturk will establish his republic and prohibit the caliphate in 1924, in 1925, he's going to ban the practice of the Bektashis. So the Bektashis, who were left without any state where they could operate, they will move to Albania, since a great number of Albanians from southern Albania and Greece, they were not Sunnis, but they were Bektashis. They will organize a congress in the Teche of Turan near Korça in 1929, where they'll declare the establishment of their own community, which will be known as Krye Gyushata, which means the head of the Dedes, and they will establish their center in Tirana. And this will be the second church of Islam in Albania. Now, as you can see from their logo here on the left, they have their own hat, which is known as Taj, and this Taj has 12 angles, which means the 12 Shia imams, even though they're not real Shia, they are a derivative of Shiism. They are somehow like Alevism of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Now, in 1928, King Zog will declare himself the king of Albania. The picture is not clear because this is a nice book that I put here. The title is Kings of Albania, Europe's self-made Muslim monarch. And even though he was a Muslim, he will become the only Muslim monarch of Europe. Because Zog will be trained in Austria and he will understand the Islamophobia of Europeans and their hatred towards Islam. When he will declare himself a king, he will adopt the name Zog, which is his family name, instead of his Islamic first name, which was Ahmed. Zog will adopt the ideology of European Orientalism towards the Albanians, which describes Albanians as non-Muslim, and Skanderbeg as the hero of Albanians, even though Skanderbeg was not an Albanian, he was a Slav. And he will claim to be the successor of Skanderbeg. Who is Skanderbeg? He is a mythical hero of Albanian nationalism who fought the Ottomans and Islam in the 15th century. So Skanderbeg will be imposed to Albanians as their national hero. And under King Zog, in schools of Albanian state institutions, Albanians will be told that they are not Muslims, but they are descendants of Skanderbeg. And Skanderbeg was the defender of Christianity against the Ottomans and Islam. Now, the rule of King Zog will come to an end in 1939 when Albania will be invaded by Italy. Italy, with the policies, the fascist policies of Benito Mussolini, wanted to create its own empire in the world of Islam and to replace the British. And one of the myths that Mussolini is going to adopt will be the title of Protettore dell'Islam, which means the defender of Islam. In 1934, after colonizing Libya, Mussolini will encourage the comparison of Islam with fascism, and Italy will sponsor the building of mosques, Quranic schools, and even facilitate Muslims of Libya to go to Hajj. In order to earn the favor of Arabs and Muslims, Mussolini will decide to bestow upon himself in 1937 the title the Protector of Islam. For those of you who visit Albania, the biggest mosque of city of Durrës, it was built by Mussolini, by the fascists. They will build mosques. And on March 18, 1937, in the outskirts of Tripoli, Mussolini will receive the Sword of Islam from a Berber bey and supporter, and he's going to use the so-called Sword of Islam to depict himself as some kind of new caliph of Muslims. Now, in Albania, Italians, they will use the same policies. I mean, like in Libya, they will try to co-opt the Muslims in service of fascism. So after annexing Albania in 1939, Italy will play with the sentiments of Albanian Muslims. Italy will attack Yugoslavia to liberate Kosovo from the Serbs. They will attack Greece as well to liberate Chamoria from the Greeks. These were regions in Greece and Yugoslavia where you had majority Albanian Muslim population. And the fascists, they will co-opt the Muslim ulamas where they will claim that Islam is fascism. So here is an article from Cultura Islam, which means the Islamic culture, the official journal of the Muslim community of Albania, where Albanian ulamas claim that Islam is fascism. And the same policies will continue in Albania even from 1943 to 44, when the Italians, they will be defeated and the Germans will replace them in Albania, in Yugoslavia, and in Greece, where we'll have the same policies of Nazification of Islam. So Italy and Germany will be depicted as the champions of Islam against the British imperialism and Zionism. So if you can see the picture here in the top, it shows Albanian Muslims protesting in Tirana, where they say we expect the freedom of our robbed countries from Duce and Hitler. And in the other poster, you see Kosovo and Chamoria belong to us, which means Kosovo and Chamoria, which is northern Greece, belong to Albania. So Duce or Mussolini and Hitler, like we had even with Palestinians, with Haj Amin al-Hussein, they will perceive Hitler and Mussolini as the saviors of Islam and liberators of Islam from Anglo-Zionist imperialism. But of course, they will be defeated and they will fail. Now, with the end of World War II, Albania will become part of the Soviet Union. And the initial plan of the communists was to include Albania as the seventh republic of Yugoslavia. But in 1947, we'll have a conflict between Tito's Yugoslavia and Stalin. And in 1948, Stalin and the KGB under Beria will organize coup in Albania. Until 1948, Albania will be ruled and dominated by Orthodox Christians and the Vlachs. The Vlachs are a Romanian minority in Albania. Present Prime Minister of Albania is not an Albanian, he's a Vlach. And we'll have Stalin, who will bring to power Albanians and Muslims. So we'll have Enver Hoxha, who will come to power, and his book with Stalin. Enver Hoxha remembers that Stalin continuously advised Enver Hoxha to bring Muslims to power, because the Soviets knew that the creation of Albania after Second World War was a Yugoslav project, and this project meant that the non-Muslims, which were the Vlachs mainly and the Slavs of north of Albania, were to dominate over Albanian Muslims. So Stalin will push Enver Hoxha to bring Muslims to power. But what will happen is that with the death of Stalin, with the coming of Khrushchev, Albania will break its relations with Soviet Union, and then Enver Hoxha will adopt the Maoist cultural revolution policies. And in 1967, because Albania will be under a lot of pressure from the West, will be a Stalinist country, will be hostile to all its neighboring countries, and because it will be isolated, and Enver Hoxha will be blamed in the West as being a Muslim fundamentalist. And moreover, the West will threaten Albania not to take control over the Catholic Church, which was under the influence of the Vatican. Enver Hoxha will declare Albania a non-religious country where all religions will be banished. Albania will be the first country which will be officially atheist in the world. And as a result, a new generation of Albanians will come into existence, and those Albanians will be educated with atheism or Kafirism. So Albania will continue to be a non-Muslim state until 1990s, when the communism will collapse and the Muslim community of Albania will be re-established under the Grand Mufti Hafiz Sabri Koçi. Now, with the fall of communism in Eastern Europe, Muslims of Albania will gain back their religious freedoms, and the 1990s will be a golden era for Islam, which Islam is not going to see in Albania since the era of the Ottomans. The Americans, they'll use the Saudis to invest in Eastern Europe. They will use the Saudis in Macedonia, in Kosovo, but Albania will be the first. And we will have Saudis in particular, but even other Arab Gulf countries, which will fund the re-establishment of Islam. We'll have the opening of schools, madrasas, mosques. And then the Muslim world will come to help the Muslims of Eastern Europe, like they will go to Bosnia. We'll have Saudis, Turkey, Jordan, Syria, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Malaysia, Iran, which will all come and invest, and many Albanians will go to the Muslim Ummah to get education. However, the new generation of Albanians who come after communism, they will have a very minimal understanding of Islam. During the era of communism, Albanian Muslims will undergo a process of Albanianization and de-Islamization, or kafirization. The new Albanian generation will have non-Muslim names, like my name is not a Muslim. Olsi, Elvis, Alban, Artan, Dritan. And we will be prohibited by law to put names like Muhammad, Hassan, and Mustafa, because there will be a process of de-Islamization. But the rebirth of Islam in Albania will come until 2001, because as we know, in 2001, and with the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the Americans will implement a global war against Islam, or the so-called war on terror. And after 2001, we'll have hundreds of Islamic NGOs who will be closed in the country. And we will have a reverse of the process of Islamization. If until 2001, we'll have hundreds of Islamic NGOs that will come and propagate Islam, and thousands of Albanians will travel to Muslim countries and learn about Islam. After September 11, any Albanian who was educated in the Muslim world, be it Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey, Malaysia, when going back to the country, will be treated as a suspected terrorist. Americans, under the leadership of President Bush, will put Albania in the map of global Islam, and Muslims will be treated as a terrorist. So we'll have Muslim NGOs will be closed, mosques will be put under surveillance, and Islam will retreat again, and we'll have many Muslim imams who will be jailed under the excuses of terrorism. Like elsewhere in the West, Islam will be equalized with terrorism, but in particular, Americans will pay great attention to Albania because it is the only Muslim majority country in Europe. We have Kosovo, which will declare its independence in 2008, but Kosovo is not a fully recognized independent state. There are many states which refuse, and the UN doesn't recognize Kosovo. And Bosnia, of course, is not a Muslim majority. And Americans will pay particular attention to Albania, even because after 1990s, in Albania we'll have large groups of Muslim missionaries, from Salafis from Saudi Arabia to Muslim Brotherhood, from Al-Qaeda. Some claim even Bin Laden will visit Albania and will fund the reconstruction of the mosques. And the Americans will be very suspicious, and they will organize a great fight, and they will succeed to make sure that Muslims will have no power in Albania. The person that you see here in the picture, Sali Berisha, who in 2008 was the prime minister of Albania, today has been declared as a terrorist by the Americans, non grata. The accusation is that he is corrupt, which he is not. Because what will happen is that, especially with the coming of the Obama administration and Biden, George Soros will become a major patron of Albania, and the present Prime Minister of Albania, Edi Rama, who is not a Muslim, he's not even Albanian, he's a Vlach, he will be imposed as the ruler of the country, The mayor of Tirana, Erion Velia, is an ex-Muslim converted into evangelical Zionist, and Albania will become one of the most pro-Zionist countries of Europe. And what will happen to the Muslim community of Albania, which is in a way the state, it is in a way Javi or Pusat Islam, whatever you have here in Malaysia. The Muslim community of Albania, the institution which administers the mosques, will be placed under the care of the Gulanis. So the chief mufti of Albania, I've been advisor to the mufti of Albania from 2003 and 2005, but since 2005, the chief mufti of Albania, the chief muftis and everyone have to belong to the Gulenist sect. For those of you who do not know who are the Gulenists are the group which organized the coup against the President Erdogan in Turkey in 2016. So today in Albania, Islam stands between the fight of Turkey for control, Albania being a Sunni majority country, having Ottoman tradition, etc., by right should have some Turkish influence. But on the other hand, Americans, they do not allow the Turks to have control over Islam. And even though President Erdogan, he shouts and screams and blackmails and asks our Prime Minister Edi Rama to remove the Gulenist organization is a terrorist described organization in Turkey. And Erdogan and Turkey asked Albanian government to remove the Gulenists from controlling the Sunni Muslim community. Our Prime Minister Edi Rama, he tells Erdogan, sorry, I cannot do anything because if I do, Americans will overthrow me. So Albania is probably the only country in Europe where its Sunni or its Islamic community is controlled by a sect which is declared terrorist in Turkey. Now, what is the percentage of Muslims in Albania? This is a map which shows where are the Muslims located. So the areas in green show where you have Muslims, and the areas in deep blue. No, this is another map, but more or less this map helps you to, in general, understand where are Muslims located. But the greatest concentration of Muslims in Albania is in central Albania and in the north. Now, at the beginning of the 20th century, Muslims made more than 70% of the Albanians in Albania. In Kosovo, they're like 96%. However, after the fall of communism, many ex-communist officials, Christian fundamentalists, including the present Prime Minister of Albania, have publicly refused the fact that Albania is a Muslim majority country. We had the visit of Pope in Albania in 2005, and when the Pope declared that Albania is a Muslim majority country, our Prime Minister, he simply offended the Pope and he said, no, we're not Muslim. He has a particular hatred against Islam. Pew Research in 2011 estimated that the percentage of Muslims in Albania is around 82%. However, in a census organized by our government in 2011, estimated that Sunni Muslims are 56%, the Bektashis are 2%, and the Catholics are 10%, and Orthodox Christians are 6%. Another census that will be organized in 2021 under this Prime Minister Edi Rama will claim that Muslims are 45%. Our Prime Minister, I mean, most Muslims, even Muslim community of Albania, they have objected the censuses because they think that they are being manipulated by the government. And the Muslim community have estimated that the number of Muslims in Albania is 70%. And by knowing the high demographic growth of Muslims, Muslims should be around 70%, but they have no power. And since 2001, institutions of Islam are in great crisis because communism destroyed the Waqf system. So most imams in Albania, they have no salaries. And unless an imam is being paid by Qatar or Turkey or Saudi Arabia, he cannot run the mosque. And we have many mosques which are being closed, and you have many Albanian Sunni imams who have to immigrate to Germany and work in construction in order to maintain their families. So this was a historical summary about Islam in Albania. I hope I didn't take too much time, and maybe you can have some questions and answers.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Olsi, for your thoughtful presentation of the history of Islam and Muslims in Albania. Your presentation has really brought many information unknown to many of our participants today. And to begin with, I would like to ask one or two clarification from you briefly, if possible. I have no time to summarize, but you have brought numerous issues by the grace of Allah. You mentioned at one point pan-Slavism.
Yeah.
So I want you to briefly describe what does it mean? Pan-Slavism. That's number one. Number two, when you were talking about Albania after the abrogation of Khilafah and the throwing out of Sultan Abdul Hamid II, you talked about Nazification of Islam and fascistization of Islam. Can you briefly elaborate what does it mean? Was there a systematic, organized process of fascistization of Islam and Nazification of Islam? After that, you talked about communistization and kafirization. So can you briefly elaborate, at least for the sake of my own understanding? Thank you, Dr. Olsi.
And for the sake of Islamization of knowledge, because I brought the anathema of Islamization here. And sometimes when imams ask me in Kosovo what I'm specialized in, I tell them I'm specialized in the process of kafirization. I tell them because I study the reverse engineering. So I mean I study how non-Muslim powers try to de-Islamize Islam. So coming to your first question, what is Pan-Slavism? Pan-Slavism was a political movement in the 19th century sponsored by Russia and Russian Secret Service of the time that sought to unify the Slavs under a unified state, or at least to help them to create their own states. So the movement, which was inspired by Russian nationalism, was somehow like pan-Islamism of Sultan Abdul Hamid, where Russians were the main sponsors, but we have even many other ideologues, where they will, in a way, pay, sponsor, publish, and inspire intellectuals across Europe to propagate among their nations in order to create a pan-Slavic union. We have, I mean, most of Eastern Europe is Slavic. I mean, from Poland to Slovakia, to Ukraine, to Bulgaria, to Serbia, to Croatia, and to Belarus. So the idea of pan-Slavism was to create a large pan-Slavic state, which of course will have Moscow, or the Third Rome, how it is known in the Russian Christian Orthodox theology, as the center of this rebirth. But of course, the process of pan-Slavism will have many problems. The Catholic Slavs, like the Croats, like the Poles, they'll be the most hostile to this ideology. And during the 19th century, when Austro-Hungary will face Russian expansionism and Slavic expansionism in Europe, they are going to fund and sponsor the concept of Illyrianism. The Illyrians were some ancient tribes in Rome that they lived in the Balkans. So they will use this concept and they will tell to the Bosnians and to the Albanians and to the Croats that you are not Slavs. Bosnians, they are Slavs, they speak Slavic, but they'll tell them you are Bogomils and you are Illyrians and you belong to a different civilization. Because the fear of the Austrians, but even Italians, was that Russia, with its ambitions, could become a great power within Europe, and for this, they're going to sponsor other ideas like pan-Illyrianism, like Bogomilism, and of course, Catholic fundamentalism. And the Austrians, they will be okay with the pan-Islamism of Sultan Abdul Hamid for as long as the Ottoman Empire was in the Balkans and the Ottomans could keep the Slavs under control. The reason why World War I will start and why the Germans and Austrians will build an alliance with the Ottomans will be because the Germans, with their pan-Germanism, they will make an alliance with the Jean Turk pan-Islamism to create an alliance to face the pan-Slavism, but they will be defeated. But even Russia, by the way, will be destroyed by the German Secret Service and the Bolsheviks. Now, coming to your question about fascistization and Nazification of Islam, is that, like I showed before, Mussolini and the fascists, they needed to build an alliance with Islam. And now that Muslims, they had lost their caliphate, and moreover, they were colonized by the British and the French, which were the enemies of the Axis, they will try to appeal to Muslims to join fascism and Nazism, and they will try to depict fascism as a kind of continuation of the institution of the caliphate. So, like I'm showing you the picture here of Mussolini. Mussolini in Tripoli, he will get a sword from some Berber tribal leader, and he will raise this sword in Tripoli and will show to the Muslims that here I am for defending the law of the Prophet. And for people who have read the memories of Hitler, Germans will also try to Nazify Islam. I mean, we know the famous history of Hajj Amin al-Hussein and his visits in Berlin, where Hitler is going to create even Muslim armies with Azeris, with Bosnians. In Kosovo, Hitler will create the Skanderbeg SS division, and in Bosnia, he will create the Handjar division. And these Muslim divisions, while they'll have the Nazi uniform, they'll have their own imam, they'll have the Quran. And moreover, we will have even the publication of books like the book of Islam and Judaism by Hajj Amin al-Hussein, will be translated into Bosnian, because Hitler and Mussolini would like to build an alliance with Arabs and Muslims in particular, who in this time they were colonized by the British and the French. And the Nazification and fascistization of Islam was in a way an attempt, like we have democratization, what we're having nowadays in the Arab world, when especially with the Arab Spring, we have democratization, we have the acceptance of Western ideas, market economy, of riba, of capitalism. Like we have westernization of Islam, the same was in this time fascistization and Nazification of Islam, which meant that Muslims had to be taught to accept the values of the Nazi fascist civilization. but which of course will fail. And then your last question, Professor, was about kafirization of Islam, is it?
The communistization and
Yeah. So we will
profilisation.
have with the victory of communism in Eastern Europe, there is a very good book from Shoshana Keller, a book entitled To Moscow, Not to Mecca. And Shoshana Keller shows the policies which Soviet Union is going to use with the Muslim ulamas and Muslims of Central Asia to educate them and to make them embrace the ideology of communism, which was resonating from Moscow, and turn Muslims from Mecca to Moscow. And the same thing will happen even in Albania. I was not prepared now, but I'm planning to write an article, but I'm very busy with you. I have so many classes to teach about what communism will do in Albania. So they will use the secret service to penetrate the imams, and they will co-opt the imams to propagate the idea of communism. So what was the basic idea of communism was a class war. So the Muslims had to believe that the Communist Party was their savior. The leader of the Communist Party, which in case of Albania was Enver Hoxha, but Soviet Union was Stalin. They are the saviors of Muslims, and Muslims have to fight against the West, and they have to fight against capitalism. And at the same time, the communistization meant that the secret service of communism penetrated the imams. Most of imams, they were drinking alcohol, they were not praying. So for you to become an imam, you should not be a practicing Muslim, and they will serve as agents in order to educate masses with less Islam. And even the process of, because in 1967, Albania is going to close the mosques. So the process of closing of mosques was a gradual one, which started since 1946. So first they closed certain mosques, they closed the madrasas, they banned religious books, they jailed people who possess this kind of literature. Then they ban Muslims from praying in a mosque 5 times in a day. And then finally they ban and prohibit Juma. And then finally they declare religion to be an agent of bourgeoisie. Because the communists, they use the dictum of Marx, who described religion as opium for the masses. So, I mean, they will target religion, and in our case, Islam, as an agent of bourgeoisie. And they'll say religion, because they were Darwinists. I mean, they were believing in social Darwinism, so there is no God. They were believing that they are descendants of monkeys. And they'll do this indoctrination through the schools, where people will be taught that there is no God, but we are monkeys. In schools, students will be told that these religions are invented by the bourgeoisie, and people who practice religion, they are ignorance. And this will be how, and then you'll have even practical laws. I am an example. My name is not Rahman or Muhammad. I'm Olsi. So I have a modern Albanian name because it will be the process of de-Islamization will be a violent one.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Olsi. Can you please withdraw your slide? Can we have questions from the floor? Anyone would like to ask a question directly to our Dr. Olsi? His presentation gives us the entire 4th century history of Islam in Eastern Europe, including Turkey, Albania, many other countries he has named. We have benefited a lot. So may I have some questions? Meanwhile, we have uploaded the I attend icon in chats. So please fill in your attendance now. So can we have some questions from the floor? From the students? From the fellows of IIMU? Welcome. You have any question to ask?
Can you hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Kamaronia here.
Yeah, Professor Camaronia is here. Okay, please, Kamar.
I have a couple of questions. First, let me thank you very much, Dr. Olsi, for sharing. Being a Malaysian, this is something very enlightening to me and of concern also. Yeah, thank you very much. Now, my question is a few questions, a couple. Number one, is history of Albania given serious attention in the education system of Albania? Number one. You got it?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Number two, how do you read the sentiments of the Albanians towards Islam today? Your personal take, because many people have different versions. And number three, are Muslim NGOs active? And if they are, what are their main focus? One or two. Thank you very much. Dr. Olsi?
Okay, so let me start from the last question.
Okay.
Are Muslim NGOs active? No. There are few NGOs, but the great problem of Muslim NGOs in Albania is that there is no funding. I mean, and the majority of Muslims in Albania, they are not rich to fund institutions. So Islam in Albania is not like in Malaysia, where you have a state that takes care of Islam, that gives funding. Most of the funding in Albania for NGOs is being given by Western embassies, mainly US Embassy, and most NGOs promote the agenda of LGBT, of feminism, of family planning, and fight against terrorism. So the main funders in Albania are the European Union and the US aid. And if you want to do something for Islam, you can apply at US Embassy and they will give you money to spy on your local imam if he's a terrorist or not. Countries like Saudi Arabia, like United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Qatar, they used to fund, but sorry, but because the global war on terrorism, Qatar, which was the last state, was forced to stop its funding. Albania has closed its Iranian embassy since 2022. Turkey has some programs, but Turkey is a secular state and it cannot fund Islam. So, are there Muslim NGOs in Albania? There are some, but most of them, they are branches of outside organizations, and what they are allowed to do is to make kurban and to make iftars. So, I mean, we are not allowed to have IIUM in Albania. IIUM is considered a terrorist university, pardon my language. Now, second, history of Albania. I mean, history of Albania is controlled by the same people who wrote our history during the era of communism. I'm specialized in the history of Albanian nationalism. I wrote my PhD thesis on the process of writing of history of Albania. And the title of my PhD thesis is Ottomans into Illyrians. And I show how the Austrians, because for the first time, history of Albania was written by the Austrian Secret Service, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, then by the Italians, and then by Christian evangelists. The evangelists in the United States, they will be the people who are going to fund the school textbook writing about history of Albania. I have even articles about this. And I show how the school system was used in Albania. It is used even in Kosovo. And in the year 2010, I became very famous in Kosovo. Because I published this book, and this book created so much problem between Turkey and Albania. And in this book, which is entitled The Narratives of a Nation, Albanian, Turks, Muslims, and Christians in the school textbooks of Kosovo, I show how the schools of Kosovo are used to brainwash the Kosovars and to make them believe that they are not Muslim, but they're Catholics. And this picture that you see here is an Orientalist picture where it depicts the Ottomans. You can see them with beards and turbans and the crescent and their swords, who come to Albania. They abduct Christian children and they forcefully convert them to Islam. So in Albania and in Kosovo, Islam is depicted as a terrorist religion, as a religion which was imposed by violence over the Albanians. And the Albanians are told that if you want to become a good Albanian, you have to convert to Catholicism, to the religion of your national hero. So in 2010, this book created so much controversy. We had even Ahmed Davutoglu, who in that time was the foreign minister. He went to Pristina protesting because they told to the Kosovars, we are supporting you, we are funding your government, we are defending you against Serbia, and then you poison your own people. But history writing is a strategic sector. And like George Orwell says, who controls the past controls the future. History is a strategic sector. They do not allow historians like me to write the history of Albania. I'm non grata in Albania in academic circles. Why? Because I tell to Albanians that we were Ottomans, and the title of my thesis shows that we were Ottomans, and we were the main contributor of Islam and Ottomanism in Europe. But you cannot say such things in the schools of Kosovo because the official ideology is that people have to be de-Ottomanized and de-Islamized. The reason why my generation, I was born in 1970s, we were legally prohibited from putting Muslim names was because there was a process of de-Islamization. And what we're having since the coming of Edi Rama as a prime minister, we're having a process of Zionistization because evangelical Christians who are a minority in Albania, they're maybe even not 1%, they are being placed by US Embassy in top position, because Albania is a very small country, it's 1.5 million, is smaller than Kuala Lumpur. So these evangelical Christians are being put into top positions, ministers, directors of research institutes and others. And their main agenda is to de-Islamize the Albanians. But of course, they cannot stop the Islamization. We live in the era of the internet. We have a massive Islamization because we have YouTube and TikTok where people can get their knowledge. So I do not know if I answered all your questions or not.
Sir, Assalamu alaikum. I have questions.
Sayyid Iftikhar Al-Jilani is asking this question from Pakistan.
Assalamu alaikum, Al-Ustaz. It's a very informative session and very thankful to you. I think our today's he covered all over the aspects, alhamdulillah. And it's very informative and I'm very thankful to you, sir. Such a very informative session. Thank you, sir.
Any question you want to ask? Just comment.
Just comment. Just
Okay.
comment.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
just
you.
comment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone from
Yes,
the Zoom?
sir, I'm asking a question.
Yes.
Sir, are the Albanians united or disunity among them, like Shia, Sunni, or school of Hanafi, school of Shafi, like this? There is conflict or anything. I want to know, are they united with Iman or Islam?
Albanians during the Ottoman Empire, they were mostly Hanafi Muslims. But what will happen is that in 1990s, there will be a process of Salafization of Sunni Islam. And most of our imams were trained in Saudi Arabia or in Syria or in Jordan. So most imams, I can say that they follow the Salafi Aqidah.
Yes.
But the overwhelming majority are Sunnis. We have Bektashis, but they're not really practicing religion. So I would say no, there is no division. I mean, I don't know,
Alhamdulillah.
99% of Muslims, they describe themselves as Sunnis, even though their mosques are controlled by the Gulenist sect, which is considered to be a terrorist organization by Turkey. And the Gulenists, they do not practice Salafism. They practice a particular version of Hanafi, Sayyid Nursi, Fethullah Gulen version of Islam, which is not a Salafi Islam.
Yes, sir. And another questions.
This is Mutiur Rahman, huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, the education system in Albania is secular or mixed? What kind
Secular,
of
secular. I mean, the religious education exists, but on private basis. The government doesn't recognize it, except the one that is given by the Gulenist-run Muslim community of Albania. So majority of people in Albania, they have no way how to learn Islam, except by going to the mosque or reading themselves the Quran and the Hadith, or going to the YouTube.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your informative discussion. حياكم الله. بارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم.
Okay. Any other question? Can we have one last question from our people on the Zoom?
Can I have a question, please?
Yes, please. Can you identify yourself, please?
My name is Baikuni. I'm from Indonesia.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for such a delightful session. I enjoy your talks very much. I have a question on you were explaining about Islamization and also Kafirization. I wonder if there is an alternative or alternative process or different kinds of movement that try to merge or bridge these two opposing categories.
I couldn't get your last sentence. Can you repeat again, please?
You were talking about Islamizations and Kafirizations, right? I wonder if there is a third or alternative movement or process that maybe try to merge these two or try to bridge between these two seemingly opposing process in Albania.
Baikuni Hasbi, can you identify yourself? You want to know your background, please?
Oh, I'm a historian too in Southeast Asia.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Where are you located?
I'm in Aceh right now.
In Aceh, all right. So if there is a different process, yes, I mean probably the process of globalization. Probably what I have in mind is that, look, I mean the establishment of the secular militant state in Europe, where we have seen the most extreme cases in France with the French laïcité and the war against church, which French Masonry started after the French Revolution, or the extreme Jacobinism of Ataturk in Turkey, where Turkey declared war on Islam, or the extreme case of Reza Shah in Iran, or Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, where both the father and the son, they declared war on Islam, a thing that provoked the Islamic Revolution and the coming of Khomeini. And the example of Albania, where we'll have the state that will become a vehicle of Kafirization is the process of globalization. What I mean by globalization is that now we're, especially in Europe, because here in Southeast Asia, you are still in the process of nation building, and the state still has control over religion. But what we're witnessing in Europe and in the West is the destruction of the nation state. So the nation state is no longer there, and we have the establishment of the empire. So we have the establishment of the European, American, or the NATOist empire. And what is good about these empires is that these empires, they are against nationalism. So I am the product of the European University Institute, and I know European Union in detail. And the mission of European Union is a fight against nationalism. And what we have seen is, especially in Europe, with the expansion of the European Union, we have the destruction of the nation state. So in countries like Yugoslavia, or Serbia, or Bulgaria, or Albania, where these nation states, they had a program of nationalization, meaning turning the Turks and Muslims into Bulgars, into Serbs, into Albanians, and process of secularization. With the expansion of the European empire, which I call it a process of globalization, we have the collapse of these institutions. Nowadays, and if you see the European American empire, look, Muslims have more rights in New York than they have in I don't know, in Cairo or in Dubai. You can open your own madrasa in London, you can run your own mosque, you cannot do that in Dubai. They'll come and they'll arrest you. So this process of the expansion of Western globalism, even though it is evil, it is bad, it destroys nation states, it gives freedom to Muslims to run their own communities. But of course, these communities, they cannot conduct a process of massive Islamization. Because for you to have a process of massive Islamization, you need a state which sponsors Islam. A country like Malaysia, who is semi-theocratic, or a country like Iran, which is fully theocratic. I mean, I was in Indonesia a few weeks ago. I went to Medan and I went to Lake Toba, and I was shocked to see the level of or the weakness of Islam there and massive Christianization of Indonesians. And there I came to understand that in a country like Indonesia, where the state does not sponsor Islam retreats. But in a country like in Malaysia, where the state sponsors Islamization, Islam progresses. So the ideal case will be to have a semi-theocratic state, even though Malaysia is not a theocratic state, but is somehow kind of a modern version of the Ottoman Empire, where you have the Millet system, where you have Malays who administer their life through Islam, through the Sharia, and you have other communities who live a non-Islamic life. So, I mean, the ideal state will be something like Malaysia, but when you don't have that, better than living under a fascist secular state, which has a program of Islamization. So better is when you live under an empire. Now, why Muslims have more rights in Toronto or in London than in Dubai or than in Pristina? In Pristina, if you are a Muslim wearing a headscarf, you cannot find a government job. They're going to fire you. But if you are in London or if you are in Toronto, you have possibility. And even, for example, in Canada, under the policies of visible minorities, you will have more chances to get a job because you are a visible minority and nobody is going to discriminate you. So when we face, because I'm talking here from a Western perspective, so when you face this militant process of secularism, which was established in Europe after World War I, when the last three religious empires of our planet, they were destroyed, which was the Russian Orthodox Empire, the Ottoman Islamic Empire, and the Austro-Hungarian Catholic Empire. And then we had the establishment of the militant secular nation state. I think that this stage is better for Muslims who live in the West, because at least now they have the freedom to practice their religion, to go to mosque, to run their own madrasas, to wear hijab, and not to be discriminated. But this is what is about the West. When it comes to the Muslim world, I believe that Muslims should have an agenda of Islamization. So the example of Malaysia, I think, is one of the best examples where, and if I compare Malaysia to Indonesia, I think that Indonesia has failed, but Malaysia has made a miracle with its process of Islamization. The reason why I'm talking about Islamization from International Islamic University, Malaysia, not from University of Tirana or University of Jakarta, is because here you have the platform to do that. Am I clear? Baigun?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Olsi,
Yes,
for
thank you very
your
much.
Assalamualaikum.
answer. Anyone?
Yeah, Assalamualaikum, dear Prof.
Yes, most welcome.
Yeah, brother, I am from Bangladesh. My name is Ali, Idris Ali. I'm graduated from IIUM, International Islamic University, Malaysia. Currently, I am from Bangladesh. So,
What is
actually,
your question?
yes, I was in class. That's why I'm not able to listen the whole your lecture. So just after all, thank you very much for your speech, and it's really very informative speech. So I want to ask about what is the social condition or situation of Albania? Is peaceful or and what is the economic condition of Albania?
Albania, like most East European countries, has a failed economy. After the collapse of communism and Soviet Union, Americans made sure to destroy our economies, like it happened with Romania, with Bulgaria, with Serbia, with Macedonia, with Poland. Majority of Albanians, they don't live in Albania, they live in the West. They live in Germany, in United States, in Italy. So the country, the main economy of the country is drug smuggling and tourism. The countries of Eastern Europe are mostly failed states because the strategy of the Americans after the fall of communism was to destroy these nation states in order to open them for their markets. So we have the destruction of Yugoslav economy, so that we had the destruction of Zastava and other major Soviet, Yugoslav, Ukrainian factories, and they will be replaced by German and American companies. So the economy is not good, but the main source of income nowadays is drug smuggling and tourism. Tourism is booming because Albania has a very good weather and is competing with Greece and Italy because it has cheaper prices. And during the summer, Albania, which has a population about 1.5 million, gets around 10 million tourists, which is not bad. So the strategy of our Euro-American rulers have been to deindustrialize us and to turn us into exotic holiday destinations. So we are like Greece, we are like Spain, like Southern Italy, places where North Europeans come and spend their summers. And we're having even many Muslims, especially Saudis, Qataris, Emiratis. And the latest invention of Albania is that Albania is going to build its own Langkawi, which is the island of Sazan, And this island will be turned into a touristic resort, will be like Langkawi for Malaysia. And guess what? Who is building it is Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of President Donald Trump. And this touristic resort, massive, will be built with Saudi money. So the Zionists, they are going to steal Saudi money and they will build a nice resort for Europeans to spend their summer.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
Dr. Olsi. It is now 12:05. We have taken 2 hours, and the presentation was very informative, as our participants have highlighted. I'm sure that everyone who participated in this program has benefited a lot, and you have given a lot of food for thought, particularly our students in the university can pick up some terms or issues from your presentation and do further research leading to either master degree or PhD degree in history and civilization, or specializing on the Balkans or others in the East European former communist states. So with this, let me thank you once again for your acceptance and presentation. And I also thank Professor Dr. Kamar Onia joining from her home and asking a question which was very, very relevant. She wanted to know the participation of NGOs in the process of really Islamization of the people in Albania and the system in Albania and so on. I also take this opportunity to thank every one of you who have attended this program, particularly my students of Masters and PhD who have followed this program. So with this, let me thank you all once again, hoping to see you in our next IIMU lecture series number 4, which will be organized in the month of February, inshallah. Thank you all very much. May Allah bless you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
عليكم السلام.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاكم الله
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله
Thank you
تعالى
all very much.
وبركاته.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.